Good morning, everyone. We are live on a gorgeous Monday morning down here in South. I'm your host, Scott Kennedy, for the Falcons Podcast. On this side over here is Nick Kendall. He is in Seattle, so he's up bright and early for us this morning. So we are coast to coast with your Falcons coverage this morning, and we're coming off a pretty impressive win over the Miami Dolphins and 2 good days of practice down there. But first off, Nick, how are you doing, my friend?
I am doing pretty well. I had a pretty chill weekend, which is fine. We'll see what we're doing next. I think next week we're going to be camping on the coast and take the dog to the ocean for the first time. So that should be a lot of fun. And he's never camped with us before, so wish us luck. I'm hoping that he doesn't cause any damage or issues to any of my expensive backpacking gear. But other than that, doing pretty well and happy to be back on Mondays. Means things are getting really real.
Yeah, would imagine it should be fine there. I want to say hello to some folks while the chat is opening up and reaching out its tentacles into the Facebook and YouTube notifications out there. We'll say hello to some folks that were in here nice and early, like Bubba Gump coming in black and red. Good morning, Bubba. Michael Ranquillo always joining us nice and early too. John Harrell, he's over on YouTube, says good morning, Scott and Nick, my Falcons friends. That's all y'all. Pamela Johnson, good morning. How are you doing? Great to see you here this morning. Bobby Carter said, good morning, fellas. Good morning to you as well. Zach Powers in here nice and early with the coffee. I haven't actually had my first sip of coffee yet. It's still a little hot for me, so we'll have to see if it'll cool off a little bit. D'Angelo Jones, great to see you, my friend. Hope you're doing well. And actually, this is starting to be the week of the Falcons local content providers meet and greet type of thing. I believe that's coming up on the 19th. So stay tuned. I'll be back with more information on that. Maurice Boney, I see you in there coming in, or Bonnie, Boney, coming in with the like. Be like Maurice, coming with the thumbs up on Facebook and YouTube. Harry Marshall Wood III says, I'm off today. Y'all are my favorite weekly activity. Welcome back. Oh, that's flattering. Appreciate you being here. Tony Wright says, good morning. Good morning to you as well. Archangel in the house. Rise up morning. For work, fellas, see Kennedy keeping that forehead shiny and bright. Actually, I try and keep it less shiny. I actually try and do that. But yeah, it's this good space up here. I was a wicked header of the ball when I played soccer. I'll tell you that much. I made good contact with it's like having a 3-inch barrel in baseball. You know, play wiffle ball with those giant big barrel plastic bats. I get to use one of those, not one of the thin ones. Robbie Red, good to be back live. Yes, it is on a Monday. Make you fumble. I'm here. Good. We're glad you're here. Lots of folks coming in, including DJ Babyface. So lots of folks coming in. We'll come back and say hello to some more people because the numbers are starting to come in as well. 19-3, Nick. Kind of a slow offensive game, both sides of the ball, obviously. Some good stands in the red zone from the Atlanta Falcons. Otherwise, I think the score is a little misleading to how the defense played. But a couple of things I want to get into today. We'll get into some of the review. We'll get into a couple injury updates. We'll get into a surprise cut for me and the addition. But first, I want to talk a little bit Falcons Dolphins. What was one of your main takeaways watching this game, Nick?
I really enjoyed how the defense flexed 3 times in the red zone. I think the Dolphins going 0 for 3 in the red zone, like you mentioned, misleading score, but still being able to do that with your reserves for the most part, I think is a big takeaway. And special teams stands out as well. I mean, D. Alford with the 80-yard return or whatever. Big game for him. I thought he was good on defense as well. So he's been a good player for the Falcons now for a few rounds. I'm excited to see that. And I think he'd probably be my MVP of the game with that explosive play. That makes a big difference in a 19-3 game.
Yeah, D. Alford had a great game on both sides. I was happy for him. 25 years old. It feels like he's been around longer than that, but I guess he just played last year. He's probably been a practice squad guy because I feel like I've heard the name D. Alford for years. So, when I looked up his reference page, he played a pretty big role last year. I'm like, wait a minute, that was his first year really playing games. Wow. And I say the defense was misleading. You could take either side of this. And yes, they came up big in the red zone. No, I don't want to count on teams going 0 for 3 in the red zone to win games. I'd like to get some stops a little earlier. But yes, credit where credit is due. They stood up and made plays when they needed to. The bend but don't break is always a little bit scary. I like a little bit more attack as we move forward. But again, there were some first team players out there. Don't get me wrong, but these were a lot of reserves, and I saw a lot I liked out of the reserves on both sides of the ball, Nick. Specifically, I think my MVP, I think Orlando Ledbetter, D-Led, asked the question, one name, who were you most impressed with in the game? And for me, it was Big 98 Timmy Horn. Timmy Horn was a difference maker in the trenches. We talk about depth. We talk about how much better this defensive line has gotten, Nick, with the starters, Onyemata, Grady Jarrett, you go Calais Campbell, you get Taquan Graham back. Well, this defensive line legitimately goes 7 or 8 deep now, Nick.
Yeah, he stood out as well. So they did pretty well. I think they did give up nearly 175 rush yards. I don't have the box score in front of me. So they had some issues with that. There were some issues with missed tackles as well. But I mean, it's preseason. It's not your starters. But maybe a little bit worrisome going forward. Something to keep an eye on because the Dolphins, based on last year's tape, really poor offensive line in the run game. Not a lot of good running backs, and still to give up, 170-ish yards is not great. So we'll, again, not too worried about it. But that is, I saw a comment in here about the run defense gave up too many rushing yards. So a little bit concerned about that, but thought overall, good job by the defense.
And that goes to the philosophy, though, Nick, and maybe we're switching places here, of the bend and don't break, but don't give up the explosive plays. Okay, we'll let you have your 5 or 6 yards here, but when it matters, we're going to squeeze you because we don't think you can 5 or 6 yards your way down into the end zone without making a mistake, especially early in the preseason with backups. So some of that's being a little vanilla in order to try and get evaluations on guys, as opposed to trying to install a scheme. We want to play a little bit more straight up and let guys go head to head. And there's going to be gaps in there. And you mentioned tackling. And I'll bring this up now because linebacker Michael Walker, 4th-year guy, I believe, who was a PFF all-rookie team guy just a few years ago, was cut on Sunday. That was a pretty big surprise to me, Nick.
Yeah, I mean, he's been a solid player for this. We talked about the linebacker position just last Wednesday, I believe, and we're like, oh, well, we're not sure about they paid big money for solid money for Caden Ellis. They used a good draft pick on Trey Anderson. That second string is a little bit questionable without, Rashaan Evans there, but at least they have Mykal Walker. Well, not anymore. So I'm a little bit surprised they couldn't even find a 7th round trade pick suitor for him at that, but he's gone. And curious, I'm a little bit shocked about the move because he's just has experience and done well when on the field.
Well, and Michael Walker, where he is best is in coverage, really, which is theoretically. That said, as I'm rewatching with the benefit of hindsight, I'm like, okay, he gets an illegal use of the hands, holding penalty downfield. There was a nice play where the end, I don't remember who it was, but the end came crashing down and forced a cut back, and Michael Walker blows by him and misses a tackle. I'm like, that's not why you get cut, though. Mm-hmm. Now, the thing is, like, okay, would we have been a little surprised if Michael Walker didn't make the 53? Yeah. Yeah. You're cutting him when you're at 90? Okay, something's going on there, Nick. I think there's something maybe a little bit more to than what we see. Maybe his agent's saying, maybe his agent's on the phone saying, listen, if you're not going to play him here, then cut him because there's other teams interested. I don't think Michael Walker is going to be out of work for long. I just don't. He's a good enough player that he should be on a 53-man squad somewhere in this league, Nick.
Mm-hmm. Somebody will pick him up. There's no doubt about that. Like I said, I'm a little bit surprised that you couldn't get any sort of value, but he is a linebacker. He's a backup linebacker. So just a little bit shocking by that, but I think it speaks well, especially now. But I think it also speaks really well. It should speak really well to what they think of Troy Anderson and Caden Ellis, though. So if we want to put this into a positive light, it means that they're comfortable with what we perceive as question marks right now at that linebacker spot. Not that they're bad, but just, don't fully know what it looks like with those two together on the field in this defense.
Someone close to my age, Chris Walker, says, Scott, the Bend But Don't brings back horrible memories of Marion Fox's horrible defense of the late and mid 80s. The only positive memories I have of those teams in the 80s were Gerald Riggs and William Andrews. Were phenomenal football players. There's some Buddy Currys in there, some Bill Fralick, Mike Kens, but the Falcons could always run the ball. But yeah, that was Ben But Don't Break. The Swamp Fox, that was this guy's nickname, and they turned him into a head coach. Can you imagine him getting a head coaching job now? That seems Nick, you're young enough, you didn't have to remember Marion Fox, but it was definitely tough. And I agree. I think there was something a little bit more going on with Michael Walker. Eric says Walker didn't fit the scheme, but Eric, that months ago. You know what you're going to do the day you hired. I want to call him Ryan Newsel now. Nielsen, right? I've got Ryan Newsel on my mind because Ryan Newsel did play pretty well at center this weekend. Ryan Nielsen, you knew that when you hired him. To cut him, like I said, I'd been a little surprised if he didn't make the 53. Wow, that's a surprising cut. To do it when you're still at 90 is pretty shocking to me, Eric, that happened now while you still have a 90-man roster. Yeah. So I kind of agree with Harry here. I think there's something else kind of going on to go with that cut. Now, the replacement, they bring in a guy named Frank, and I'm going to say it's Ginda, Ginda, like Linda with a G and not Ginda, or, Hinda. Frank Ginda. What do you know about him? They brought him in, signed him. They actually announced his signing, and then the Michael Walker cut came afterwards. This is Sunday afternoon. What can you tell us about the Falcons' new linebacker?
He was a standout in the USFL. I keep getting – now I'm going to mix up the USFL and the XFL all the time. Defensive Player of the Year, I believe, for the USFL, and getting a shot here. They want to see what he can do out there. And so don't know too much about him. Don't remember him in college or anything like that. So, played for the Michigan Panthers and had a good time out there. So XFL, he also did play in the AAF and XFL so far. So he's hit all of the different leagues so far. Now going to get a shot in the NFL. So can't hurt. We'll see what it looks like out there. It's obviously a different type of football out there. I think, Division I football is a bigger deal than what those other leagues are for evaluation. So we'll see what he can do, but he had success in the USFL and has bounced around. So we'll see what happens.
I looked around at him. I think he was at San Jose State, and he led the nation in tackles in 2017. So we're talking about the guy that could come in and do a job. Who's going to come in and do a job? Who's going to play that Foye Oluokun role? Who's going to play that Rashaan Evans role? If you need to. If for some reason Caden Ellis and Troy Anderson are uber athletic, uber talented, especially Anderson, but might be penchant to over pursuing here and there. They might make more big plays, but they might give up a few more big plays, and you're hoping that balances out. Who can come in here and be my 150 a tackle guy who's going to make sure that 3-yard gain doesn't turn into 10 yards or more? This guy fits the bill. Mm-hmm. Frank Ginda, all he does is make tackles. At 175, it's still I think that's a MAC record when he, or not MAC, but Mountain West record when he was out there. So a little bit of a sleeper, but he was a USFL Defensive Player of the Year this last year. I think I read XFL the first time, but it was actually USFL. And unfortunately, he fell into one of those roles where the billion-dollar industry that is the NFL makes players give up their eligibility to find out if they even want you at all. I declare my eligibility for the NFL draft. I'm not going back to college. That's insane. Major League Baseball does it right. Major League Baseball, the billion-dollar industry that it is, makes everybody eligible for the most part. There's a couple rules in here, so I'm exaggerating a little bit. But I draft you, Nick, while you're a junior in college, and I have to convince you to give up your eligibility to come and sign for me, the Atlanta Braves, instead of you who don't know anything about it, who are, living hand to mouth. And he gave it up, and he didn't end up getting drafted, signs as a free agent, and didn't end up making the team. Has bounced around on some practice squads here and there, but has earned a living through smaller avenues of football. I think the average salary for players in the USFL is about $65,000 a year. he might make more than that at camp this month as an NFL player. So it's good to see him get a chance, and I don't worry too much about Michael Walker being out of work for too long. I really don't. Couple injuries I wanted to get to, Nick. Cordero Patterson being held out. Cornell Armstrong being held out. Frank Darby and Mike Hughes. Nothing in there too worrisome. And then as far as what Arthur Smith was saying, said all should be good. They should all be pretty good. Nick, how about the running back? What do you think? I won't make you say his name. I'll say it for you because I looked it up in advance. Igwebuike out of Northwestern, kind of a Renaissance guy. I was reading up on him, sang in the choir, played in a band, does all kinds of stuff. But he had a heck of a game. And Nick, I said before, if I need a running back, I'm going to go see who the Atlanta Falcons are looking at. They do a pretty good job at that position.
Yeah, I remember Igwebuike running all over my Hawkeyes, unfortunately, because Northwestern was a thorn in the side for a little bit. I'm curious if those days are over, if with everything going on Northwestern this last year and the NIL stuff, and the transfer portal. But he looked pretty good. Again, I have a hard time with Falcons running backs that are in purely this system because Arthur Smith is so good at dialing up plays. And he had a few good ones in there,
Sounds
but
to me
nothing.
like you're making an argument that taking a running back at number 8 might have been a little high.
we thought it was a little high, but I think
we're through that. We're past all that. Bijan Robinson's really, really good. We get it.
Special player. And we saw him outside of this scheme. Yeah. That's the point I'm getting. We're seeing it's hard to outside of this system. It's like a double blind kind of experiment here. Like, well, we've only ever seen him in this environment. So it's kind of hard to say, but I thought he played pretty well. It was very efficient. Never had a rush longer than 11 yards, but averaged 5.4 yards per carry. So overall, a pretty good game. I mean, the story of this game, though, the offense was ho-hum. Logan Woodside out there. I was just felt like a Broncos game. I'm ready for the defense to get back out there, winning the turnover battle 4-0 in this one. We haven't even talked. I saw it in the comments. He deserved a shout out. I was getting to the point to it, but we got sidetracked. But DeMarco Hellams had an incredible game there.
He did.
He's been hitting big hits. I don't think he's obviously not coming for Bates, but I don't think he's coming for Grant either, but he's looked great out there. I'm going to see if he can maybe crack some rotational roles out there in some different packages. He looked great. And then somebody I was not super familiar with coming into this, but caught my eye. I mean, when you have a pick six, it's not going to be hard to not catch your eye, but Breon Borders had a hell of a game too. Looking at it, he had 5 tackles, 3 pass defense.
He was everywhere. He played a big part. And I think he had the interception in the first drive. And Trey Flowers is the one that came in, with all that length that he's got. He's just a different being out there as tight as the spaces get tighter. Trey Flowers is someone to look at. But Breon Borders wasn't even on the depth chart. I'm looking at our lads. I'm like, okay, I just bring up our lads. It's easy to read. And he wasn't even on their depth chart to begin with. I'm like, who was 36 again? But you're right. He had a good game too.
Yeah. So he deserved a shout out. The defense just in general. I mean, can we give a shout out to we said one of the big questions coming this year just goes the unknown. I did, at least, because when you don't know, you don't know. But Ryan Nielsen, it's just preseason. I know it was not great quarterback play out there from Miami or anything other than the run game was solid. But I thought that the defense giving up a lot of rush yards is worth watching, but 4 turnovers, only giving up 3 points, over 3 in the red zone. That is a solid A from the defense in my book any day. So excited to see what he can do going forward. And Maurice coming in saying Logan Woodside, never heard of him. Prior to Toledo, I believe he played for Toledo. I remember some action out there. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but he was fine.
And what's interesting is as you bring it up, that wasn't great quarterback play when you mentioned the Miami Dolphins. Well, Logan Woodside's battling for a roster spot. He's the 3rd quarterback, but that doesn't guarantee you a spot on the 53. He has to play well enough to earn a spot on the 53 so that they will think it's worth it to carry a 49th player on active game days. Up until last year, you could only carry 48. 48, you had to leave 5 inactive from your 53-man roster. They changed the rule this year. You can carry a 49th, but he has to be from your 53-man, and that 49th has to be a quarterback. Excuse me. So Logan Woodside is your 3rd-string quarterback. I thought he played exactly like you want a backup quarterback to play. Took care of the ball, very efficient, in command. And yes, he was signed when Marcus Mariota left the team from the Tennessee Titans. I think he was on their practice squad, and they signed him. That's where he came from. But Logan Woodside, and it brings me to the point, Nick, that it's not just about Woodside. You're wondering about the quarterback play. Logan Woodside looked like a guy who could shepherd an offense that could win a game. Third string guy. That says a lot about the system. It says a lot about the pieces around him. It says a lot that Desmond Ridder doesn't have to be the second coming of Lamar Jackson for this team to win games, Nick.
Yeah, he was fine back there. I mean, they really played if you don't turn the ball over, we're going to be just fine. And when you win the turnover battle 4-0, you're going to be just fine. 99 times out of 100. I do wish sometimes he was a little bit quicker to get himself out of danger. It took 4 sacks in the game. Now I know it's not behind the Falcons offensive line, not going against Dolphins, really good defensive line either. So that would probably be my biggest complaint with him, but thought he did a good job, taking some shots as well. Was it Xavier Malone had the big shot down the field, 27-yard catch. I thought he had a pretty good game overall. So yeah, he did fine. I don't know if he did enough for me to be like, yeah, we should keep the Falcons should keep 3 quarterbacks. Maybe rather have him on practice squad and bring him up in that situation. But
I don't think he makes it to the practice squad.
I don't know if it's worth then keeping around just for the volume of it and how much you're already
I'm
paying.
just saying, if you cut him, I think someone else might pick him up.
Maybe. I'm a tools guy for a lot, and the ball doesn't really pop out of his hand or anything, so I'd probably be okay taking that risk personally.
As a backup guy, though, I'm for a guy that's not going to hurt me.
Yeah,
and that's what he is. And just Jamal comes in as a reminder. Thank you, Jamal. He says Breon Borders is going to be suspended the first 3 games of the season. That's why he wasn't on the depth chart. And good morning, everyone. Thank you for the reminder. I had forgotten that. And real quick, John, I just want to clarify on this. He says in the chat, he says the third quarterback is the emergency quarterback and doesn't count against the final number. That's not true. How they've changed the rule is, like I said, normally you're allowed to keep 48 active players on game day from your 53-man roster. You could flex a couple guys from the practice squad, but once you flexed a guy 3 times, you either had to promote him full-time to the 53 or cut him. This year, you're allowed to take 49 active players on game day instead of 48. But the 49th has to be a quarterback, and he has to be on your 53-man roster. So that's the way the rule changes. So you have to decide if a third quarterback is worth that 53-man roster spot. If he's not, then you're going to have to cut him and try and sign him to a practice squad. That's how this will work. And I liked what I saw from Logan Woodside. I've seen a lot worse quarterback play out there for sure from guys that are 2s and 3s out there, Nick.
Yeah, he was fine. You spent so much on Taylor Heineke. Desmond Ridder's the guy. I'd just be curious if the math works out where it's worth that squeeze to, could be another special teams guy out there. And Young Wei Koo missed a kick. We're not in panic mode, but maybe I'm on edge because of how bad the Broncos kicking game looked. A few more guys I did want to shout out again, all defense. You mentioned Timmy Horn, but I was pretty impressed, and I think it was somebody in the chat here brought it. Yep, Brian Adonis. Huggins had a good game as well. 4 pressures from the interior defensive line is big. And then Arnold Ebiketie, and he was there playing pretty much the whole game, out there late as well. But
tell me about that. What did you think about seeing Arnold Ebiketie out there in the 4th quarter?
I think we need to see you get run reps out here and show that you can play a full game and through a myriad of solutions, not just, kind of the 15 snaps that a pass rush specialist would purely get. So I think it's mainly working on some stuff. I don't think he's on the bubble by any mean. We saw the depth chart. He was listed first compared to like Malone, who was 3rd string, but I think it has a lot to do with, just he has things to work on, specifically run defense and being fine and as a edge setter. So that's my takeaway for that.
And I wanted to come back to Ryan. I'm glad you reminded it because I said Horn first off, but Huggins was out there too, number 90. I was like, who's 94? Albert Huggins is having a nice game out there. Again, you start looking at the depth chart for the Falcons, which I have then since hidden. But someone's also asking about Rashaan Evans and, why isn't he on a team? And is it too much money? I can't imagine that it's a money factor. He signed a 1-year, $1.75 million contract last year and had 150 tackles. He wasn't expensive last year. And I was like, okay, well, was he playing on kind of like Jeff Okudah. The Falcons aren't paying him anything hardly right now, but he is being paid a lot based on a previous contract. When Julio Jones signed with someone else, it's like, well, he can sign for $2 million because he's already been paid $20 million in bonuses for this year. So his overall compensation for last year was still 8 figures. That wasn't like that with Rashaan Evans. It wasn't like that. He wasn't making a ton of money last year. But looking, when we talk about the defensive line now, Zach Harrison wasn't all bad either, coming off of that edge. And he had his hand down playing that defensive end. But you go, if you're looking at your 3-4 and you start Grady Jarrett, Onyemata Campbell, Harrison, Timmy Horn, Taquan Graham as your rotation, how's that for a step up over what you've been able to put out there the last couple of years, Nick? That sounded pretty salty, because then again, you got Albert Huggins, Joe Gaziano, number 99, flashed a little bit in the second half. Big 74, Carlos Davis. I remember seeing him out there. There's some competition for those line spots. The trenches are going to be legit on both sides of the ball for the Falcons this year. When's the last time, if ever? 1998? I remember saying that.
Yeah, no, it looks like they look pretty darn good out there. Again, you can't look that great by giving up 170 yards overall. So there's some questions there. Now, how much of that is the linebackers? Seeing Mykal Walker get cut the next day makes me think there's maybe somebody out there that is taking a little bit of the brunt of that. But overall, the defensive line looked pretty darn good, and that was without a lot of the big time difference makers. Again, I don't know if they have that. I'm pretty confident in saying they don't have that true, alpha edge. That is somebody that you can just be like, okay, you're going to win your matchup no matter what, or we know they're going to double team you no matter what on third down. That really changes the dynamic of your front seven, but you have a lot of depth and a lot of wave of guys as well. So, and it's a far cry of where the Falcons have been the last 2-3 seasons. So
yeah, for sure,
you should be very excited about that on both sides.
People are just starting to pay attention. Like, wow, these guys dominated the Miami Dolphins defensive line all practices. Duh. Wow, the offensive line. And we did a show on Friday with Alan Pupar, who does he does all Dolphins podcasts. He did it on Friday. He says the Falcons defensive line pummeled the Miami Dolphins offensive line. I'm like, well, that's good to know. There's guys out there that have been, there's some legit dudes out there for a change, and people are posting like they're shocked about this. And I usually just throw in a sarcastic, yeah, but Lamar Jackson, because that was the answer all summer. Quarterback, Desmond Ridder, Lamar Jackson. They spent like $250 million. They should have some talent out there this year. On that note, we are going to get out of here. Nick and I are going to hop on over to Mile High Huddle, and we're going to talk some Broncos for breakfast here for a little bit. Broncos had some highs and lows over the weekend too. The Falcons had some highs and lows, but it's the highs feel a little bit better when you get a win, and then the lows feel a little bit lower when you don't. So we're going to talk a little bit of that. Nick and I will be back here on Wednesday morning to look forward to the Bengals a little bit. We'll talk a little bit more personnel than we did today. Just kind of hit on some of the highs and lows and a quick recap and hit the news. Appreciate everybody for being here. We're knocking on the door of 100 people watching right now. Thank you so much. So make sure you hit a like if it's your first time here. And if it's not, share it to somebody. Find another Falcons fan to come in and talk some football with us, because this show is growing and growing and growing because of people like you and the help that you provide us. Happy Monday, everybody. We got football again on Friday. Nick and I will be back Wednesday at 9 a.m. We'll see you there. Thanks, y'all.